Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories. We're covering the case of the documentary of the Gilgo Beach serial killer. And if you haven't watched it, it's on Peacock, it's pay-per-view. It's quite interesting. And no one was involved more in this case from the early times of this case than attorney John Ray, a flamboyant attorney who kept this case alive. I don't agree with everything he says, but he kept this case alive. He represented Shannon Gilbert, who incidentally, her case was never included in the Gilgo Beach serial killings because the Suffolk County District Attorney did not determine that case to be a homicide. However, Mr. John Ray, who you see up on the screen, flamboyant attorney, good guy. We had him on the show. I'll talk about him. I don't agree with everything he says. But he was bothered a little bit by this Peacock documentary because he has appeared numerous times on numerous TV shows. He's one of those guys you say he never met a camera he didn't like. He loves the attention. Anyway, he always felt and has given several press conferences in regards to the involvement of Asa Ellerup and her daughter Victoria. So not involvement in the way that they fully knew about these murders and they fully understood that their father, in this case, and in Asa Ellerup's case, her husband, was the Gilgo Beach serial killer. But yet in this documentary, you would have Asa Ellerup, you'd believe that she's still madly in love with Rex Heuermann. But there's so many signs in this case of dysfunction to the average viewer that we can't really buy it. But anyway, we're going to take a look at John Ray today. And he appeared on Banfield. He spoke about this case, and he feels that Asa Ellerup is involved and is just making up. She's putting on a show. Let's not forget, she was paid 7 figures for appearing in this Peacock documentary. So John Ray will not back off, and he insists that Asa Ellerup and her daughter Victoria knew all about Rex Heuermann. So folks, hold on to your hats, hold on to your loved ones, hold on to your cup of coffee. You're about to enter true crime from a police perspective. You're about to enter the off-the-cuff zone, the police off-the-cuff zone. There has to be some common sense.
They were the ones who called 911 to get him help, and now they're calling for change.
And now a word from our sponsor. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for all your sports betting action. With baseball season in full swing, we're deep into the NBA and NHL finals, and BetOnline has more ways to stay in on the action with the latest odds, news, and scores, even live in-game betting while the games are being played. We keep the dog days of summer rolling with the largest selection of odds on everything, with updated odds on Major League Baseball, UFC and boxing to tennis and NFL futures. BetOnline remains the best online source for all your sports wagering info. In between games, head over to the BetOnline Casino with all the top Vegas-style games, including poker and live casino. BetOnline, the game starts here. So if you haven't seen the Peacock documentary on the Gilgo Beach case, I think you really should. I think it's important if you're really following this case, if you're a true crime aficionado, I think it's so important to watch this documentary because it doesn't really answer all your questions, but it gives a different perspective. But perhaps is it a little show busy where Asa Ellerup and her daughter Victoria coached a little bit by the documentary producers? I see there's probably no doubt with that. I'm going to play a snippet, a 2-minute snippet from the documentary.
The question everyone keeps asking is, How could you not know?
The Gilgo 4 was one of America's longest serial killer cold cases. After 13 years, this bombshell drops.
Rex Heuermann, architect, father, husband.
He basically was the person that lived next door.
He was a monster, living a double life.
One person saying this, one person saying that, but my memory says this.
There's so much evidence against you. I don't even believe you, and you're my best friend. Convince me, give me something. Did you do it?
Rex Heuermann insists through his lawyer that he's innocent.
Is it possible that family ever suspected that something was off about this guy?
The most mysterious figure is Rex's wife.
The investigator says to me, "Have you heard about the murders on Gilgo Beach?" I've heard of them.
The idea that the wife didn't know anything is hard to believe.
Does everybody really believe everything they hear?
Hello.
How you doing? I'm doing great, now that I've got you on the phone.
Obviously, there's a lot of dysfunction in this family. And to even think that Asa Ellerup did not know what was going on or pretends not to know what was going on. And now that she's also fallen madly in love with Rex Heuermann again, who's being charged with 7 of the Gilgo Beach murders right now. And really real evidence, disturbing evidence that we've seen in this case. Disturbing evidence in the way of a 42-page bail application that outlines this case going back to 1993 to a woman named Sandra Castilla. And the commonality or the what connected all these cases were that virtually all the victims were sex workers. And was that something that also slowed this case down? Was the Suffolk County detectives not taking this case as seriously because the victims weren't teachers or nurses or librarians or mothers? They were some of them were still mothers in addition to being sex workers. But did they not treat them as well? Did they not work as hard on this case? And of course, corruption, a huge amount of corruption with a man named Chief James Burke, who was running this investigation. And it would seem that he did everything possible not to solve it. And we look at this case, but the big question in this documentary and the big question we have from John Ray, the attorney for Shannon Gilbert, was that, was Asa Ellerup involved? And he feels absolutely, he made some allegations that I thought during this case were off the wall, were quite outrageous, but yet he's quite a competent attorney. And I also like to give him credit because he deserves the credit. He kept this case alive. He kept the attention on this case when it probably would have been swept under the rug in some way, but yet John Ray kept it alive. He just appeared on Banfield the other night. Let's hear what he had to say.
Joins me now. He represents the family of Shannon Gilbert, whose death and disappearance led to the discovery of the other Gilgo Beach murder victims. John, thanks for coming back on the show. What is your reaction first to Asa Ellerup's comments in this documentary that she's fallen in love with him all over again, seeing him in jail, accused with 7 murders?
You have to understand, I think, in looking at this entire series that was put out, that this is a posture. This is a show. And she's being paid a lot of money to put on a show. And she and her daughter are doing very well at that. This is all big. This is fake. And her statements are informed by this fakery. What I mean is this. If you listen throughout the entire 3-part series, one thing becomes very clear. Both of those women no matter what, are actually setting it up to show that they have no involvement in this, in these killings or in anything connected to these killings. Neither one of them has any involvement,
John,
if you listen to them. And that's what they're professing. So I don't trust a word you're saying.
It's weird to me. Okay, but what's weird to me is that if you don't want to have any involvement, and yet, you know, Asa Ellerup's hair was found in the tape on some of the victims, so the involvement is there.
You know, that is many people, well, as we followed this case, when they heard that Asa Ellerup's hair was found on at least 2 of the victims, many people were quite disturbed at that and felt that that immediately implicated her as being involved. However, we know transfer evidence. If you live in the same house with someone, of course, hairs from your head are going to fall off. Could that get in places? Could that get on the tape? Could that get on clothing? Could that get on furniture? And could it be transferred from Rex to these victims? Absolutely. So it doesn't mean that she was involved, but she's in that house. The daughter, Victoria's in that house. And their hairs were found on some of the victims. So is that somewhat disturbing to most? I would say almost to all. Yes, it's a little bit disturbing.
There. Why wouldn't she just disavow this man? She's divorced him, right? She divorced him like within, I think, months of this arrest. So why would she now profess this undying love and suggest that he's innocent? That makes her look maybe even more culpable, or possibly more culpable. And now she can be compelled to testify because she divorced him and doesn't have spousal immunity.
Well, you still, I think, maintain your spousal immunity during the time that you're married. So I don't think that she loses anything in that regard. But if you think about it, for her to actually pretend that she still loves him and so forth, well, maybe I should take that back and say maybe she does, but she loves him in a very sick context, a very dark context in which these people were living, in which they were operating. And it's undeniable, as you just pointed out, certain undeniable things. It's undeniable that her daughter's hairs were found on 2 of the bodies, that her hairs were found on 2 of the bodies. And it's undeniable that each of them were living in that house throughout the time that Ray Tierney, the DA himself, had said, he was almost quoting me, that he had hundreds of prostitutes, hundreds, that were going through that house. Now, that's a 1,343 square foot house. It's a bungalow, or in essence. And you mean to tell me a married couple for 27 years doesn't know what's going on downstairs?
Thank you for...
So that is very, very disturbing. Absolutely. Like she didn't know what was going on in her house. And the house, let's talk about the house. The house was disgusting. Absolutely a hoarder's paradise. It was just absolutely, I think that you would have had to be mentally ill to have lived in a house like that, to be able to just ignore the filth, the disgustingness of that house. And I'm sorry if I'm hurting the feelings of some of you, but I had heard from some people, unnamed source from the Nassau County Police, that when the police were processing that crime scene, they couldn't stand to stay in there for more than 15 minutes. It was so disgusting. So do you think you need to be mentally ill to live in that house? You know, John Ray is still giving sort of seminars. 15 hours ago, he gave this little seminar in regards to this case at a local, I believe it was a library. Let's play a little bit of this.
All right, but you don't have to understand, but I have to follow you. So let's go. Is that a question? We don't know. I don't know, But is it possibly a code word? Okay. So now you come to other evidence as well. The district, I had a sex worker who called me. I've had many different witnesses involved in this case who contacted me and given me statements and so on, as you may know. And one of them was a lady who was She was British, but she had worked for a sex trafficking organization for years out of Brooklyn. And she had said that she serviced Rex Heuermann at his house many times. And she said he was a gentleman towards her and she never had any trouble with him. And she would go there sometimes with more than one sex worker. He would get multiple partners. And she was very credible. You can take it for what it's worth. She called me early on, right after the arrest took place. And we spent about several phone calls. She called. She'd just come up out of the blue, and I spent about 8 hours talking to her, trying to validate whether or not she was real. And she seemed to be. Anyway, she talks about Mrs. Ellerup coming out in the middle of the day, chasing her and another sex worker to the taxi, and because she believed they stole her iron. And she made them look through the cab to see if it was there. And she told me that from her organization, hundreds of sex workers serviced him over the years. So when I held the press conference and said that, I was scoffed at for this kind of a thing and for even bringing it up. And everybody said, oh, he's crazy, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Well, there was a witness who came, for what it's worth. Several months later, Ray Tierney said in one of the bail applications, he was serviced by hundreds of prostitutes. That's what he said.
So this is some of the allegations that over time, over the years, Attorney John Ray, who is the attorney for Shannon Gilbert, and she was recovered, I would say, miles from the Gilgo Beach area. And her case was never included, and it was never determined to be a homicide. However, Attorney John Ray always felt that that case should have been included. And in February 2024, we had John Ray, the Police Off the Cuff podcast, had John Ray on our show as a guest. And it got a little bit heated, to say the least. And I like John Ray. I have a lot of respect for him. However, I don't know if all of the allegations he's made during this case, in fact, can be verified. And I don't know if, in fact, the Suffolk County detectives, the Gilgo Beach Task Force, if they've tried to verify and connect the dots to his allegations. But I'll play a little bit of him appearing on the show, and you could see it got a little bit heated.
With her pocketbook, her cell phone, a perfume bottle cap, and some money in her wallet. They were found in a circle right behind Dr. Peter Hackett's house, about a quarter to a third of a mile away from the body. Nothing else was scattered. There were just jeans that were left there. So that's not accurate either. You got to know the facts. If you want to talk on these things, you got to know the facts.
Are you saying that the clothing wasn't found with the body?
The only clothing found with the body, she was wearing a white blouse, as Barbara Brennan testified. She saw her very clearly in the daylight and before Shannon disappeared. And Gus Coletti identified her as having a white blouse on as well. And
the jeans were found some other location from where the body was found.
The jeans were found in a different location.
Yes,
yeah,
so
Mr. Ray, based on Michael Bodden's report, he wrote, she was still wearing deteriorating fragments of clothing, a white or tan shirt, black brassiere, thong panties, and blue denim jeans. That's in Bodden's report.
That's incorrect.
Okay.
The blue
Then if he's incorrect here, but he could be incorrect in other parts of his report. That's a favorite line of attorneys. Because if this is incorrect, he made lots of mistakes then. Did you read this? Hold on, Mr. Ray. Did you read this for accuracy? You said you worked on it with him.
I did. I didn't write the document.
It's only 3 pages long. If there's mistakes in a 3-page paper by a former New York City medical examiner, that I have questions about the accuracy of this entire report.
Okay, so you say because he mentions the blue denim jeans, which were found elsewhere, his entire report is wrong, right?
Well, yeah. because you worked on it with him and you read it and you said you worked on it with him. So now you're saying we're wrong about reporting the clothing, and it's right in this report. And you said you worked on it with him.
Yeah, I did, but I didn't write the report.
Yeah, but you should have read it over to make sure it's accurate. Look, when we're on the stand and attorneys pound the shit out of us for bad reports, that's part of being a detective. And this is a medical doctor with a 50-year experienced attorney. There's big mistakes in this report.
That's a mistake, but the genes are found.
It's also a mistake, Mr. Ray. I don't mean to cut you off, but it's also a mistake that you said when I said that there was clothing scattered. You said, well, the clothes were found elsewhere and the body was. That's what I meant by that. So you said I was incorrect, but was I correct? Was the clothing found other than where the body was found?
One piece of clothing was found.
Okay,
so as you could see, it got a little heated there, and. You know, I just pointed out to him, as I was a homicide sergeant, I came up through the ranks and I testified a lot in court. If you presented a report, a 3-page report, and it had 3 or 4 mistakes in it, and in this case, it was written by a former New York City chief medical examiner, Dr. Michael Baden. And if that report had 3 mistakes in 3 pages, I would rip that report as unreliable. And then Attorney John Ray, he read it and he said he worked on it with him. First of all, I don't know why he's working on a report with an attorney, with a medical examiner. Maybe he could check it for accuracy and completeness, but I just don't think it was a good look. And as I said, I do not wish to disparage Attorney John Ray. I happen to like the guy a lot, but you can't have it both ways. If you're going to insist on accuracy and completeness and insist the case of Shannon Gilbert was a murder, and in fact, get Dr. Michael Baden, who went against the Suffolk County medical examiner who concluded the death was undetermined. They could not determine how she died. And Baden writes that it was a homicidal. She died due to a homicide, but no specific way: asphyxia, drowning, suffocation, blunt trauma. No, undetermined, but homicidal means she died. That's what he put. This is John Ray appearing on Cuomo.
Do we not have proof of what you're suggesting? The authorities say otherwise. They say that the wife was not in town at the time and that they do not believe the wife was aware of what was going. What do you know that they don't?
Well, several things I know. And they said that. I don't say now that they still say that. They said that at the very beginning of this investigation, but other things have developed. I have a witness, a very credible witness, who I spent many hours with to interview. And from that witness, as well as from the circumstances of this case, I know that Mrs. Ellerup is conning the public right now with this press conference and the rest that she pulled off to say that she's in need of money. She is not. And furthermore, she is complicit in her husband's solicitation and use of sex workers in his home over the course of years, many of them. And she, in this tiny little home where she lived and he lived, she was upstairs when he would be downstairs having sex with these prostitutes. And he spent enormous amounts of money on them. And it was a regular thing that happened. And she's now, after 27 years of marriage, in the age of computers and cell phones, when you know where everybody is at all times, didn't know about what her husband was up to downstairs. That's just nonsense. There's 2 out of the 3 hairs that are found on the wrappings of the bodies are hers. That alone puts her in the circle of suspicion. And if the police come out and said, as they did, well, she had an alibi, well, maybe not once we start to study these cases a lot more carefully. But she was complicit, as you heard me say.
Forensic.
Go ahead, sorry.
I hear what you're saying, Counselor. I just want, no, not at all. Just want to put some meat on the bones of this, because it's, you know, it's such a sensitive and damaging thing to say, because, you know, you got this family that may be as traumatized as anybody else. What I have heard from not just the perspective of authorities, but the forensic experts is if he had these victims in the house, it's not surprising that you would find DNA from the wife or hair from the wife. It's her house. But how do you know that she was, as you say, complicit in his activity with sex workers? Who is this witness that you have who would know something like that?
I have a witness who has refused to identify herself publicly at this time. I just spoke with her very recently, and she is a very, very credible witness. I say that from 40, I pull rank, I guess, is how I'm making the argument. I know that could be a fallacy, but it also could be truthful. And that is that in my 41 years of experience as a trial attorney and litigator, I tested her using the usual test for truth, and she tested out fine. So I'm perfectly willing to share.
When do the rest of us get to?
Pardon me?
When do the rest of us get to meet this person and test their credibility and what they have to offer?
You know, John Ray did have a press conference with this person. He also claimed that with her was a New York City narcotics detective. And when he had the press conference, the incident that he alleged occurred happened like 25 to 30 years prior. But yet this witness recalled minute details of what had occurred. And then I believed he claimed they were also with one of the victims. How convenient. And I don't have all of the details with me right now, but these are some of the allegations that attorney John Ray, the attorney for Shannon Gilbert, who wasn't included as one of the Gilgo victims. And therein, I think, lies some of the problems, is that the attorney for Asa Ellerup, Robert Macedonio, he claims that John Ray is just trying to remain relevant because over all the years that he was involved in these Gilgo Beach murders, he's never made a dime. The family of Shannon Gilbert had no money. The family of Shannon Gilbert, they've kept this case sort of alive, but they never could prove, there was never proved that this, in fact, was a murder. And it's a whole other story in regards to the death of Shannon Gilbert that we can't go through today, but I know many of you are familiar with this case, and it's a whole other story. Let me go back to Cuomo.
That's her choice. And right now, she's held me back from doing that. However, she does exist, and she's real, and it stands to reason as well. What she tells me is completely consistent with the obvious, and it's the utterly improbable that she didn't know about what his shenanigans were in that house for all those years. It's just ridiculous. And she's,
John Ray,
she's out there.
I appreciate you making the case. Anytime you want to come on with her.
So that is, again, John Ray, his position on this. And he is pretty upset, I think, that Asa Ellerup and her daughter Victoria are not considered as part of the prosecution to this case. But Ray Tierney and the Gilgo Beach Task Force said they are satisfied that Asa and Victoria are not involved. So many people get upset. Then how did their hairs get on the victims? And we discussed that numerous times through transfer evidence. If in fact the victims were brought into Rex Heuermann's home, hairs from his wife, hairs from his daughter, or even if some of the materials he used, duct tape, and I hate to get so graphic, but hairs could have been transferred from that and gotten onto the bodies of some of the Gilgo Beach victims. So quite interesting. So John Ray, the attorney for Shannon Gilbert, he insists Asa Ellerup is involved. And this is nothing new, but except the documentary came out, the Peacock documentary came out, and he is now resurfacing to say that he believes Asa Ellerup was involved. So folks, we're going to keep covering this case. This is quite interesting. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Bill Cannon from Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. Have a great day, everyone, and God bless.
One episode just ain't enough.